are having our history club tonight, and it's great to see everybody out tonight. The goals of the history club are two. One, to have a club where you can hang out with some friends, you get to know people. Number two, talk about history. So we're gonna attempt to do that tonight. We meet at Berkeley Fellowship of Unitarian Universalists. I want to thank them for letting us use their facilities. And if you ever wondered what a Unitarian is, to me, it's like the strangest thing. I'm a member of the Unitarian Church, but it's like the strangest religion, because if you ask them, well, what do you believe? They'll say, that's up to you. So the baton is passed to you, and you decide what you believe. It's not about telling you what we believe. So anyway, maybe you want to check it out sometime. Tonight, we have Paul Nordine on sound and video. Thanks so much, Paul. And we have, we're going to have four speakers. But before I say that, if you want to make a donation, help us pay for the rest of the expenses, there's a basket over there on the piano. If you want to join, if you want to sign in, your email address will let you know the next time we meet. We meet usually the second Wednesday of the month in the evening. So, and if you want to become a member of the Berkeley, what do we call it? Berkeley History Club. If you want to be a member of the Berkeley History Club, the major benefit is you get to decide who talks next. So let me know if you want to do that. Just put on the sign-in list, yes for member, and we'll get you on that list. So tonight, after the sound effects were properly done, we have four speakers. I'll go first. I'm watching the pen, see if it's going to roll off the floor. Lawsuit about ready to happen. I'll go first. I'm going to be talking about the last days of Barabbas. And let's see. After myself will be Roger Halston. He's going to be talking about heresy in the Middle Ages. Joanna Foley will follow with the title of her speech is, Does BFUU Need an Elevator Speech? Even though it doesn't have an elevator. And Hank Pellissier will speak about the modern history of free transportation. And like usual, he turns it into a question and answer kind of game thing. And I hear there's even a prize. So we'll see. He's holding something up. It looks like a Clipper card. So if you win tonight, you will be walking home with a Clipper card. And so, yeah, I wish I thought of that. Thanks, Tom. Let's see. So tonight, the last days of Barabbas. So before I start talking about this guy, Barabbas, I want to give a little bit about myself. Let's see. I studied historical Jesus for 30 years. I used to be a plumber, missionary. What else did I do? School teacher. And I love the subject of the historical Jesus. I'm an addict. And so if you ever want to talk about him and you have hours and hours and hours, call me up. So tonight, I'm going to try to do this in 10 minutes. So we'll see how that goes. Let's see. The last days of Barabbas. First, I want to start talking about the last hours of Jesus. And the second part will be about the last days of Barabbas. Now, I want to tell you a story tonight. And the story is taken right out of the New Testament, or it's taken out of what is implied in the New Testament, what's strongly implied by the New Testament. So this is the story. 2,000 years ago, it was a Thursday afternoon about 2 o'clock, and everybody in Jerusalem had finished their Passover meal. The disciples with Jesus ate their Passover meal also, and we call that the Last Supper. At the end of the supper, Jesus tells his disciples, if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak. That's like your coat and also your sleeping bag. Go to the market, sell your cloak, and buy a sword. Right after that, they leave. So now we're going to go look at I'm going to do a little drawing of a map so you kind of get a sense of how everything works. We have Jerusalem, and it's expertly drawn. And then in the north part of Jerusalem, there was a fort, Anatolia. and below that, it was a gigantic temple, the largest temples ever made in the whole world, gigantic temple. And then someplace in Jerusalem was this tiny little house, and someplace on the upstairs in that house, Jesus and his disciples were eating. They're done with the meal. He tells them, go and sell your sleeping bags and buy a sword. And then they go off to Mount of Olives, M for mountain, and then go off to the Mount of Olives, and it's about 3 miles away. And Judas Iscariot goes and reports to the temple, to the high priest, what's going on. And then the message gets to the governor of the the governor of the country, Pilate, and that report goes to him, and he sends out one cohort of soldiers after Jesus. So one cohort is 800 soldiers to try to catch Jesus. They'd been trying to catch him for like a week. And because Jesus had disrupted so many things. So they got him. Now they know, this guy Judas Iscariot says, I know where he is. I'll take you there. And they're out after him. As soon as they leave, the people in the city would know 800 men are walking out of the city, right? Everyone would know that. So as soon as they leave and they're outside of the hearing and the sight of the people in the city, insurrection takes place. And so in the insurrection, you could imagine, it doesn't say what happens exactly, but you could imagine the people in the city would have attacked the fort. And they would have had 1 or 2 cohorts left in the city, which would have been 800 to 1,600 men left in the city to defend the city against thousands. But if you ever read about history of Roman warfare, you know, Romans often could be outnumbered by a lot and still win. And they did. They won this time. The people were put down. The people were arrested. And in that group of people that were arrested that night was one guy. We only know the name of one guy that was arrested. And you know his name is? Barabbas. There we go. So one guy's name is Barabbas. He was arrested. And then the soldiers come back from the Mount of Olives. And Jesus is there in custody with Barabbas and all the other people, all the other rebels. So Pilate, you could imagine him thinking about this. Like, it was, in one way, you could think, it was really bad luck that we had sent out 800 of our soldiers to go after this Jesus guy and his disciples, and then right after that, we get attacked. That was really bad luck, or was it? Was it planned? And he actually needs to know the answer to that question, because if he could figure the answer to that question, if it turns out it was planned, then he needs to go after Jesus' people. He has to go catch the disciples, catch Jesus' brothers, if he has a father, a son, get the men of that group and arrest them, sell them off as slaves, get them out of the country. See, these guys, governors of the country, they like Pilate, they were like, it was a fine line for them to keep their jobs. Right? If they're too cruel, then they got fired. If they're not cruel enough, the people revolt and that kind of thing. So they have to be just cruel enough to keep everybody under their thumb, but not too cruel. Now, Pilate eventually does get fired for being too cruel. That happened about 3 years later. So anyway, so what he does is he thinks, now this is the part that's strongly implied, the thing that the insurrection happened as soon as the soldiers left, right? But anyway, so my thought is he asked the crowd, he's trying to figure out, was Jesus' action connected to the insurrection? And so he asked the crowd, hey, I'll let one of these guys go free. You could have Jesus, I'll let Jesus go free, or you could have Barabbas, okay? And if they pick Jesus, then the crowd loves Jesus, is supportive of Jesus, and so maybe Jesus' group is connected to this insurrection. If the crowd picks Barabbas, then maybe they don't care much about Jesus. Jesus is just this crazy guy that goes around saying he's the king. I'm the king. I'm the king. And so they're like, okay, he's just a crazy guy. So that will help Pilate decide what's going on. And so what the crowd picked, you guys know it as? Barabbas. The crowd picks Barabbas. Jesus goes and gets crucified. So why would he still kill him? Well, he had claimed to be the king of Israel. So for that, you get killed. But he ignored the disciples. The disciples, after just a few years later, they have moved to Jerusalem, set up shop. They're there for decades, and mostly ignored by the people in power. So that's why, so that's sort of what happened with that. And so now the question is what happened to Barabbas, right? We know Jesus supposedly died on the cross, and his disciples were like free to operate, but what happened to Barabbas? So, fast forward about 20, 30 years later, and there's a guy. Oh, before I tell you this, Barabbas' dad, which we talked about in the earlier speeches, Barabbas' dad is actually Jesus' dad also. Jesus and Barabbas were brothers. Okay, and that whole thing's been argued before on the previous YouTube, so I don't have time to do that. But anyway. So Barabbas' dad, Judas, his original name was Judas, son of Hezekiah. He was a rebel. And he was a fugitive, so he had to hide out from the Romans. And if you're a fugitive, if you remember watching anybody watch the show Fugitive when you were a kid? He always had to pick new aliases for himself. So these are only a few of his aliases. These are the first ones he picked. So he picked, his original name was Judas, son of Hezekiah. Hezekiah was a rebel also, okay? So his original name was Judas, son of Hezekiah. Then his first alias was Judas, son of Josephus, Judas, son of Gamala, and Judas of Galilee. Over the years, he picked different names. If you see a pattern here, he used his first name, his given name, Judas, that he used, and these are his other nicknames that he came up with. So what happened to Barabbas? Now we're going to talk about the last days of Barabbas. So there was a guy about 20 years later, in the year around 55 or so, we don't know exactly when, who marries, his name was Jesus, son of Gamala. Jesus, son of Gamala. The exact last name, of Jesus, Barabbas' dad. He picks this exact name. Only two people pick that name in all of history. All of history. So he picks the exact same name. This guy, we know this guy picked that name because nobody called themselves son of a town. Gamala was a town where a bunch of rebels lived. So you don't call, like I was born in Oakland. I never call myself Jeff of Oakland. I have other nicknames, but none was Jeff of Oakland, right? So no one back then also, you look through read all of Josephus, you have very few. You have just people whose parents were fugitives and rebels. Jesus of Nazareth, there's one. There's this guy, Judas, son of Josephus, that's a town. All these. So he picks this name that is the exact same name as Jesus' father. And what does he do? He marries like the most wealthy woman in the city of Jerusalem. Her name is Martha. And so he marries Martha. Martha's really rich. And what she does is her dad had been the high priest, and three of her brothers had been high priests. So she bribes King Agrippa II the value of 72 eggs, that amount of gold. Like you pick one egg's worth of gold, like it'd be about that much. Well, they had smaller eggs back then, right? So, that much gold times 72, she bribes that guy, the king, to make her husband the high priest. So he becomes high priest for 1 year, and it's around the year 63 Common Era. So this guy, Jesus, son of Gamala, you can read about him in Josephus, and he's famous for one thing. He started the first educational system in the country, of Israel. He started this, he opened schools throughout the country. If you're over the age of 5 or 6, you can go to school. And he started that. So after 1 year, he was replaced by someone else. And so that's what he was really into, education. And that's also just like Jesus' father. So this guy has 3 things. This guy actually has 4 things in common with Jesus Barabbas. Barabbas' first name was Jesus. We talked about that in a previous discussion. You can find that in Matthew. Look up Matthew. It'll say what Barabbas' first name is. If you read a certain, one of the versions. Anyway, the most respected version is a revised version Yeah. So if you look it up there in Matthew, it says what Barabbas' first name, Jesus. So we have Jesus Barabbas, the family of Jesus Barabbas, and the family of this guy have a lot of things in common. They have the name Jesus, and according to Talleyrand's lexicon, she tells us how often these names come up. So in a family, this name comes up 8% of the time. That they had in common was this name, son of Gamala, which only 2 people in all of history back for 500 years had that name. So that came up, let's see, it was a point. So okay, 0.1% of the time. Okay, and that was the Gamala name. And education, the interest in educating the young, that came up. Only 2 people in 500 years were described as interested in educating the young. It was this guy and Jesus' father. And so they have that in common. So that's also 0.1%. And then also being a family living in Jerusalem, about way less than 10%. So that would, if we just grant that. So Jerusalem, so we grant that. So the odds of it just happening by randomness is like 1 in 40,000, something like that. So we know it didn't happen by random. There's a reason for it, right? Now, the tricky part is, what's the reason? Now, to me, I think that the most reasonable thing is that Barabbas had to hide. He couldn't go back. After he was freed by the Romans, he couldn't go back to his friends and his family and stuff, because if any soldier saw him with any male person, they would be like, okay, that guy must be a rebel. Right? So they could have picked that guy up and sold him off as a slave and just keep doing that. As long as he was near any friend of his or a relative, friend, associate, all of those people were at risk of being picked up by the Romans and sold off as slaves or killed on crosses and stuff like that. So he had to go hide. And where's the best place to hide? You had to be in a crowd. Like if you're trying to hide from the police, are you going to go out there walk down the street where there's nobody there? No, you're going to try to get in the biggest crowd, go to a parade or something and mix in, right? So he had to survive and help his friends survive. He had to be in a big crowd, and the biggest crowds were in Jerusalem. And also he needed a place that would support him. And as it turns out, that the Jesus family had a lot of supporters in Jerusalem. Like, for example, Hezekiah, Jesus' grandfather, was from Jerusalem. And we know that because when Hezekiah was captured, he was a rebel who was captured. And when he was captured, it was the women of Jerusalem who were complaining, who protested the capture and the treatment of Hezekiah in custody. So most likely he was from Jerusalem. And we know that Jesus' father, Judas, son of Hezekiah, we know that this character was famous in Jerusalem because he was the most famous person in the whole country. He was a speaker, and people came from the whole country to see him. So he had he and his partner Matthew had the most popular faces in the country. So they had a lot of support in Jerusalem. And then Jesus himself, it turns out, Jesus himself had a lot of supporters from the rich and wealthy and powerful of Jerusalem. He had Joseph of Arimathea, and he was a member of the Sanhedrin and wealthy. And Nicodemus, who was wealthy, and Chusa, who was the chief of staff of the government of the country. Chusa was the chief of staff. His wife was a supporter of the Jesus movement. So he had all these people supporting the Jesus movement. And then the disciples, after Jesus died, if that's what happened, the disciples all moved to Jerusalem. So why wouldn't Barabbas go to Jerusalem and mix in with these rich, wealthy people who wouldn't have recognized him, but they knew he was connected to them? You know, it's like your long-lost brother or long-lost cousin that you've never seen in your life, and he comes to a reunion, and there he is, and you go, oh, so you're blah, 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 you know. So it's that kind of deal. So what I think what happened is that he stayed in Jerusalem, or if he left, he came back, and the Jesus people moved there, and that was the safest place in the country for him to be, and that's where he seemingly was. And that's also, if they're the same guy, then it would make sense that this guy, Jesus, son of Gamala, could attract the most wealthy woman in the country, Martha. So I believe that they are the same persons. And now if you want to know what the last days of Barabbas were, if I got this right, if all this is right, remember, I could be wrong. It's just, there's one chance in 40,000 that the numbers don't work. But if I'm right about that, then Josephus tells us what the last days of Barabbas were. Now, I guess I'll just call him Barabbas from now on, okay? So if I'm wrong, then just delete out of your head Barabbas and put this guy's name instead, Jesus, son of Barabbas. So what happened was this. There was a revolt in the year 66, and the Israelites were able to overthrow the Romans, get the Romans out of the country. And then there was interfighting between a variety of groups, and one group was the Zealots. And in the year 68, the Zealots wanted to bring in another group to help them fight the other rebels. So the rebels were fighting each other. And this guy, Jesus, let's say call him Barabbas. Barabbas did not want the second group, the Idumeans from Edom. He didn't want that group to be let into the Jerusalem, into the walls, into the city of Jerusalem. So he worked against it, he fought against it, and they were let in anyway. And what's the first thing they did when they got in? They killed him, right? So this guy, Barabbas, died for fighting for what he believed was true. So he died just like Jesus died for what he believed was true, and just like, who else? Jesus' brother James died. If you read about James, you find out he died for what he believed. The disciples, almost all the disciples were actually Jesus' relatives. Almost all of them died for what they believed was true. Just like Hezekiah, the rebel, dying for what they believed was true and what was right. And they put their life on the line, and it cost them. But they have come down through history, through us, through Josephus and the New Testament. And that, I believe, is the story of the last days of Barabbas. Thank you. So, any questions? Oh, yeah. Barabbas? No, that's
Hello?
Yeah, it's on.
It is on, okay. I'm just kind of curious. So, Jesus found these rich people in Jerusalem that really liked him. And I'm curious as to why they liked him, because he's making speeches about it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into heaven. So I'm just not sure why rich people liked Jesus. I mean, I'm going to assume he had some kind of charisma, but I'm just wondering if you know anything else like.
Right. Yeah, we'll respond to artists in a second. So why would they like? Well, one thing, it seemed like they were relatives with this group that knew Hezekiah. So they had like family connections, and that might be the number one thing. So Jesus was like in the Pharisee group. I know people say, oh, Jesus fought the Pharisees all the time. But if you study, it looks like he was in that group. So anybody that was like leaning towards the Pharisees would have liked Jesus. Those leaning towards the Sadducees would not have. So most of the wealthy were in the Sadducean group, but there were plenty that were not. So, boy, that's the best I could probably say about that. Sorry about it. An artist brought up the point of the eye of the needle story wasn't about if I got artist's point right, wasn't about a literal needle. It was like this gate, and they talk about this. There's like you could actually get through it. It was hard. It was like a gate, like the two walls were tight, and you kind of hard to get through. And if you're carrying a lot of stuff, you can't get through. So you have to put your bags down, kind of thing. So I think that's where that was from. Turn mine off? Oh, that. Oh, gotcha. Oh, thank you. There you go. Thank you. Any more questions? Awesome. So great. Thanks so much for hearing me out. And next is going to be Roger Halston, who's going to talk about 20 minutes on heresy in the Middle Ages. Thanks, Roger.
All right, so sounds like this mic is on. Yes? Yes, okay, all righty. So I prepared far more than I can say tonight, so I think this might be the beginning of at least a couple of presentations on this. One thing I want to say about heresy is that there were no executions for heresy for almost 600 years in the early Middle Ages, from the fall of the Roman Empire until 1022 AD was the first execution for heresy. And at that point, it still was very infrequent. It was really not until the next century that there was that there were very many people being executed for heresy. It built as time went by through the Middle Ages, and it actually peaked with the most executions for wrong belief occurring in the early modern period, during the period of the Protestant Reformation and the Catholic Counter-Reformation. The religious wars of Europe at that time were severe. Something like 1/3 of Germany lost its population. And this is the tail end of this was actually the Salem witch trials in the 1680s, I think that was. Those occurred here in America because America was kind of the backwater, and back in Europe, executions for witchcraft really weren't being carried out anymore, hardly, although they did have the odd witch burned all the way up to 1835 in northern France. I want to define next what is heresy. According to a definition in the 13th century, it is an opinion chosen by human perception that is contrary to the Holy Scripture. It's publicly avowed, and it's obstinately defended. So that's the translation that comes to us. And so what this meant was that heresy would involve a judicial procedure that was usually adhered to. So first an attempt was made to persuade the person to recant. And only if they would not give up the belief that they were told was heretical, only then would the church, a court of the church, convict the person, and then they would be turned over to the secular authorities to punish, because the church had no mechanism for injuring, as it were, or for executing. So what this meant was that those that were executed then, if this procedure was followed, was only people who were choosing to die for their beliefs. So obviously this could have a major impact on onlookers or those who heard these stories, because it rivaled the stories of the early Catholic saints who had chosen martyrdom for their belief. So it was a very powerful thing, and sometimes creating a martyr only strengthens people's beliefs. Although there was, of course, an alternate view, which was certainly the view of the orthodoxy, and that view was that this individual who persisted in their error was so enthralled by the devil that they couldn't break free of their sin. I think it's worth recognizing here that the motivation of the church was a humane one, in the sense that they were really trying to save souls from damnation. They believed in their theology, and they made every effort, usually, to try to persuade people to be saved from their error. It's also true that there are multiple cases in which the judicial procedure wasn't followed through, usually not because the church didn't want to follow the procedure, but instead because the crowd would seize the person and kill him on the spot before the trial could be held. So something happened in 1022 that led to this first execution in almost 600 years for heresy. And what happened was that on the orders of King Robert II of France, a number of prominent churchmen were executed, burned to death. And there is good evidence, I think, that this conviction of heresy of these churchmen was motivated by dynastic struggle among powerful dukes. King Robert had 3 wives in succession. Not sure what happened to the first wife. The second wife was the mother of the Duke of Blois. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, actually. If anybody knows French, you can tell me. How do you spell B-L-O-I-S-E? I assume it's Blois, because French leave the end off. Blois. Okay, I'll go with that. Okay, so anywho, the king married his mother, but then replaced her with his third queen, who was a cousin of the Duke of Anjou. Did I do all right with that one? Anjou. Anjou? Anjou? Oh, Anjou. Anjou. I'm not so good with French. But anyway, he then actually went back to his second wife, then he went back to his third wife, and so he was really vacillating between these two houses, these two aristocratic houses of the two dukes. And the clerics he had executed were close to the queen he had at that time, the cousin of the Duke of Anjou. And the evidence is that the prosecution brought against them was by supporters of the previous queen and her son, the Duke of Blois. Okay, so anyway, the point here is that it does seem that there were political reasons for this unprecedented, at that point, unprecedented execution of persons for heresy. And it's especially striking that these were people who were key to the government at that time. One of the churchmen that was executed was actually the personal confessor to the queen. So these were very important churchmen, very prominent churchmen. Sort of ironically, King Robert was later known as Robert the Pious. He had a biographer who began the idea of the king's touch, that the king could cure disease by the touch of his hand. And that persisted for many centuries in France and England. I don't know how many minutes I've been talking so far, but one thing I will say is that maybe you can tell me, I got about 10 more minutes? I've talked about 10? Okay. Obviously, this topic of heresy in the Middle Ages is an enormous topic. It went on for centuries. But I think that it had different various causes, and among them were shifts in philosophy and theology. There are also socioeconomic factors at play, I think, and also and among those would be the fact that there was rising literacy. And so the Bible, reading the Bible, was no longer exclusively something that only churchmen could do. You didn't always have to even be able to read Latin, because by the early 1100s, vernacular translations were becoming available for at least parts of the Bible, especially a New Testament book, the Book of Acts of the Apostles. And so this was allowing the laity to interpret independently of what the priests were teaching. There was a reform of the church that came in just a generation after that first execution for heresy. So in the mid-11th century, there was a really very significant shift in papal policy as far as what the Pope was promoting and what the public imagination was captured by, and in their expectations of what Christianity was and how it should be practiced. So I'll just go a little further in this and talk more another evening. But one of the ideas that was coming more prominent was Neoplatonic philosophy. So it was based on Plato's ancient distinction between the physical world and the world of ideas. And Neoplatonic philosophy was especially attractive to Christians of a mystical bent. The Neoplatonic idea was that the world was impure, that our flesh and the material world around us are associated with evil and corruption, and that only the spirit is incorruptible. And so Christian mythics were attracted to the concept of their souls being able to break free from the body and unite with the divine. For the church, this could lead to some problematic ideas. They could lead to ideas the church found heretical. One idea might be that some people would reason, well, when Christ was incarnate on earth as a human, he may have been corrupted by his human nature. Neoplatonists might deny baptism on the grounds that the holy water, although blessed by the priest, was still physical water and therefore impure. And how could that lead to salvation when sprinkled on a person? They might deny that the priest was able to perform the sacraments on the grounds that the priests often had impure, sinful lives. And the urge of the Neoplatonist philosophy to avoid the impure taint of this world led some to abstain from sex or from the eating of meat, since both of those associated the person too much with the physical world instead of the spiritual. Early Christian thinking was primarily based upon Jewish ideas with influence from the mystery religions of the Near East. I talked about that when I talked about the conversion of Constantine. But Neoplatonic thought was being introduced to Christianity around the year 1000. It was a gradual thing as people began reading more of the ancient texts of the pagan Greek and Roman writers. They were reading those texts sometimes just as examples of good form. How do you write good Latin? Well, let's read some of these authors. Don't believe their ideas, but hey, they really knew how to write Latin, didn't they? So these were being read, and then gradually people started considering some of these ideas. But this Neoplatonic thought could be challenging to reconcile with the Orthodox Christianity that had come from the early Christian era. Even when Christian thinkers did find ways of explaining how they were compatible with an Orthodox theology, it would require some subtlety, usually, to explain it. And these subtleties could be misunderstood. And if someone had some reason for wanting to frame you as a heretic, it would be easy to misconstrue the subtleties of your reasoning, misconstrue it as being heresy. So, Jeff, do you have an opinion on how much longer? Yeah, okay. I will say one more point here, and that was that many people thought that the greatest heresy was simony, I think. Again, I should have checked how to pronounce these things, but I'll check that for next time, the pronunciation. This derives from a story in the New Testament, in the book of Acts of the Apostles. There's a story that there was a magician, Simon Magus, and he came to the apostles when he saw that they were able to cure with their laying on of hands. And Simon says to them, hey, give me this power that you guys are sharing with one another. Give me the gifts of the Holy Spirit. I'll pay you good money for it. But this was something he was refused, as that would be, a sin. And so simony then was defined as the sin of paying for the gifts of the Spirit. I will say that like most, or not, I won't say most, but like many stories from the Bible, it's hard really to know, I think, exactly what was meant by that. And often the stories are very brief. They don't go into nearly enough detail for you to be able to come to any firm conclusions. So it's easy to argue about all that stuff. But simony came to be defined as the heresy of purchasing positions in the church. Simony. Yeah, is the spelling of simony. And so purchasing positions in the church was practically a norm. It was very widespread in the early church, from the fall of the Roman Empire up to around 1000 AD. It was very common for the positions in the church to be desirable because the church had properties that produced an income for the support of the different clergy. And so if you got that position for a family member or for yourself, your family could then enjoy that income. It was worth paying a little something and making an investment, you get a good return. And they would buy these positions even for family members that weren't ordained clergy. If you were a wealthy leading family in the area. And so there was this reform introduced around, there was a series of orders from the Pope to stop it, as well as a lot of preaching against it by some of the most influential preachers of the day. So I will take any questions if you have any. Or I will say, talk to you again another time. Anybody? Oh, yes.
I'm just curious if you know or have a guess, when they were looking for recantations, were they looking for sincere recantations, or were they, if someone just said, okay, whatever, man. Yeah, right, you're right, whatever. I just don't want to die. If you have any idea.
I'd say it was a mixed bag. Sometimes they were quite happy to take someone's recanting, and but I guess in general, if they were really following the letter of the law, though, they would say, okay, as long as you're recanting, you're in the good, because the definition was that it was obstinately defended. And again, it was based on this idea that you really were publicly avowing and trying to mislead others, trying to lead others astray. That was a key thing. Yeah, another question there.
Did this have anything to do with the Inquisition?
Yes, next time, it was actually in the title for tonight that this would also be about the Inquisition, but I didn't get to that. But yes, definitely, next time I'll tie it to the Inquisition, yeah. Thank you for that teaser.
You can leave it on. Great, thanks so much, Roger. That was cool. That's very nice. Thank you. Let's see. Next up is Joanna Foley. She's going to talk to us about elevator speeches and maybe actually a physical elevator. So Joanna Foley, thank you so much.
Good evening. So Jeff said first to talk a little bit about ourselves. That's probably dangerous. Any of us who are inclined to get up here probably could go on and on. So I'll try to keep it brief. I've been a member of this congregation since 2014. Spent most of my life elsewhere in the South, the Midwest, New York City. And I've been in and out of Unitarian Universalist congregations, starting in Nashville, Tennessee, when I was a college student. I was a history major in college, and I've had careers in social work and journalism. And what I'm doing now is sort of a mixture of those two, and I call it commemorationism. It's not what anyone aspires to be when they grow up, a commemorationist. For me, it's about where history and art come together, and also the connection of local history with national history, how it represents, sometimes it represents what's going on in the larger world, and sometimes it's quite different from what's going on in the larger world. So there are two, my title was, Does BFUU need an elevator speech, even though it doesn't yet have an elevator? So there are two themes here, and I'll deal with the local one first. The first is BFUU's quest for an actual elevator. Having one in our two-story building across the courtyard would be it would make the buildings over there, the second floor, more accessible to the teachers and all the groups that rent space for us. And it would be good for all their participants, but especially those who have mobility issues or are differently abled, as we say. So an elevator might well bring us new renters, which would boost our budget. So why don't we have an elevator if it's such an obviously good idea? Well, discussion of this has been going on at least since 2014, when I joined this church. And the benefits are what they say about committees in Unitarian Universalism, it takes a while. So the benefits are obvious, but the obstacles are equally apparent. An elevator doesn't come cheap. They don't go on sale at Office Depot or Costco. And even if they did, if we got one on sale, used elevator, there's a concept. There are required permits and building codes from the city of Berkeley that take forever to negotiate. And Jeff has been involved in this to some extent, so I'm sure he could give us details. And also, security is an issue in a building that houses a preschool. But adding solar panels to our roof was another issue which was discussed for years before it finally happened around 2022. And so because of that success, hope for finally getting a BFU elevator has been rising over the years. Pun intended. The second historical theme in this story is the larger world of elevators, or lifts, as they're called in British and Canadian English, because they, lift things, lift people, lift equipment from one level to another. The first elevators go way back in history at the Roman Colosseum, where they were simply a wooden platform and ropes, and they were used to raise wild beasts, hoist them up into the arena for, devouring the gladiators or the Christians or whatever. So, fast forward a couple of thousand years, the modern elevator was invented by Elias Otis, an industrialist in New York. And he teamed up with P.T. Barnum, the great, what do you call him? Showman. I'm thinking predecessor of Trump. No, that's not a good thing to say. He wanted to demonstrate his elevator safety in the World's Fair in 1854. So he had some people in the elevator, and he cut the rope of the elevator to demonstrate its safety features as it was going up. And so this was a dramatic action, and it demonstrated, conclusively the value of his product in a short, impactful way, and probably scared them to death, but it worked. So the invention of the elevator went on to have a huge impact on modern architecture and manufacturing, lifting people and heavy equipment to heights previously unimagined. We wouldn't have skyscrapers if it were not for elevators. And on a less lofty level, on the level of individual life, the invention of the elevator has been a godsend to anyone who ever had to schlep a baby in a stroller or a disabled elder in a wheelchair to a top-floor medical appointment. I have been in both of those roles in life and don't know how I would have made it without elevators. So a lot more could be said about the value of elevators in the modern world, but I'm not going to say it. Not because it's a downer, that's another pun, but just a piece of history for another talk by someone like an engineer, not a social worker. So what I want to talk about is the impact of the elevator on human communication in what we're talking about here. And its invention, the spin-off, was a particular focused style of speaking called the elevator speech, or the elevator pitch. So the elevator brings together in a small enclosed space small groups of people. And the time that a typical elevator ride takes, which could be 30 seconds or 2 minutes or more, depending on the height of the building, one person can make a pitch to another person or even to the whole group. A pitch to promote a product or a service or even themselves as a potential employee. So the speaker has a captive audience. Its access to the targeted person is not blocked by an administrative assistant, like it could be in a natural office, or by a busy signal or voicemail on the phone. It's a captive audience, briefly. So short and sweet is the key to success with the elevator pitch. So wherever elevators were used, elevator pitches followed. They became almost as common as, elevator music. So in Hollywood, for example, struggling screenwriters could pitch their scripts to busy studio executives during the elevator ride. And in the world of glossy magazines, a journalist named Michael Caruso was active in the 1990s at Vanity Fair. And as a senior editor, he was always trying to sell ideas about the stories that he wanted them to run to the editor-in-chief, but he could never pin her down. She was always on the move. So in order to pitch his story ideas, he would join her on short, free periods of time in the elevator. So from these beginnings, the elevator pitch became ubiquitous, adapted to particular circumstances. So, but an element that it has in common, it's typically clear and concise and compelling. And it should be easy to understand and brief and highlight the value of whatever it's promoting. So within the UU universe, the elevator pitch has been shaped to meet our specific needs. Unlike more traditional forms of religion, the UUs don't have a creed. So one important need is to tell people what we believe. And the UUs actually have developed a curriculum about this called the Core Path of Faith Forward. that allows people to get together and study for 3 sessions, practicing writing and delivering their own elevator pitches. So I'm going to read you some examples of elevator pitches that emerged out of this curriculum. So one says, we believe in the value and worth of the part of God in every human being. Our faith respects many ways to reach or mesh with a forgiving, gracious, loving power or spirit beyond our human capabilities. My life has been impacted by this faith because it truly reflects my beliefs and values. So, it seems a little wordy to me, but it kind of covers all the bases. So here's another one. We freely choose to work together to build a better world for all people, also known as the kingdom of God. Thus, our focus here is on the here and now, and I feel welcomed, loved, inspired, and challenged at X Church. And if you ever want to know more, I would be happy to accompany you to one of our services. I like that one better. It's sort of more, it doesn't deal just with belief, but personal interaction. And so if those are a bit wordy, I did find some examples of shorter ones. One, Unitarian Universalism means never having to say, I'm right, you're wrong. And another, our faith is not interested in saving your soul. We're here to help you unfold the awesome soul you already have. So these days, elevator pitches are not likely to be delivered in a natural elevator. They could be the opening words in a service, or you could experiment with a chat in an airport line after your flight gets delayed. You're wearing your chalice pin or some other identifier, and someone says, tell me what that represents. I don't know that this has ever actually happened to me, but it's the ideal circumstances. So there's one more thing. Is there room for humor in an elevator speech? And it depends on who you're speaking to, of course. But here are some possibilities I found online. And I want to give credit to Jeff Foxworthy, the creator of the You Might Be jokes. You might be a Unitarian Universalist if you're unsure about the gender of God, or even if there is a God. You might be a Unitarian Universalist if you study the 7 strong suggestions instead of the 10 commandments. You might be a Unitarian Universalist if you have trouble singing hymns because you're always reading ahead to see if you agree with the words. I can relate to that one. So writing this has encouraged me to think about my use of elevator pitches. And in reading what other people wrote, I realized what I kind of like of using more personal examples about the benefits of being in this particular congregation. And just last Sunday, I said to a visitor who was talking about seeking fellowship and social connections, I said, I have felt warmly accepted in this congregation. I've made new friends, and I've been encouraged to share my insights and challenged to learn new skills. So, getting back to elevator pitches in general, throughout the UU world, and here in particular, they'll be as individual as there are individuals in the congregation. They can add an element of uplift to our greetings to visitors and to guests. And elevator pitches can be used when we finally get an elevator at BFUU, or even if we never get one. Elevators cost money, but words of uplift are free. Any questions? Anybody want to off the top of your head, throw out some words for your own elevator pitch or one you think we should be using? Help it to unfold. Yeah. Okay.
Great. Let's give it another hand. Thank you so much. That's pretty fun. Very uplifting. Let's see. Hank Pellissier is last but not least, and he's going to talk to us about the history of the modern free transportation systems in cities or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, I'm going to talk about the history of the modern free public transportation movement, and I should explain why I picked this weird topic. And it's because I'm mostly obsessed in my life with wealth distribution. The fact that some people have billions and billions of dollars and other people don't have any, and that bothers me. And so I read obscure sort of economic ideas like Picotism and Huey Long. And lately I'm reading limitarianism. And there's also global egalitarianism. And I read these ideas about how to make the whole world a lot more economic equity. So anyway, when I think about that, and I think about all the money that the billionaires hoard, I think about what could be provided. And one thing that could be provided is free transportation, which I think would make a lot of people's lives a lot easier. So what I put together is 24 questions. And I'm not going to keep score. Everybody's got to keep track of their own, how many answers you got right. Honor system here, no cheating. Just keep track of how many you get right. And if you win, if you get the most right, you get a clipper card that I stole off my wife's desk today. She was gone, so I took it. And I realized as I did this that none of you have ever met my wife. And so, pardon me? I don't know anything about this card. It could have $20 on it. It could have 75 cents on it. And I think it's funny that nobody here has ever met my wife. She could be a completely imaginary character for all you know. Somebody that, she could just be like a photo I tore out of a National Geographic in August 1958 or something like this, like a pretend character. But anyway, we're going to say that you can have this card if you get the most answers right. So what I think is interesting about researching the history of this is trying to figure out, because what I want to do is establish free transportation here in the San Francisco Bay Area. So that's the reason that I wanted to put this together and try to learn on all of these places that have free transportation, how do they get it? Because I've been working on this for about 2 weeks now, and mostly what I do is send out email asking various organizations and politicians to support my idea. And overwhelmingly, my emails get ignored, except I've gotten 4 endorsements, one from BFUU, another one from the Eco-Socialist Network of San Francisco Unitarians, another one from a magazine I'd never heard of called Socialist Viewpoint, and a 4th one I don't remember. But I'm still working on it. Okay, so here we start with the questions. Name the New York City mayor candidate who is currently running on a platform that is promising free transit. You all got it right. You're starting off with 1 point each. Great. Okay, there is only one nation in the world that offers entirely free public transportation to all citizens in that nation. What nation is that? Wrong. Wrong. That's kind of close. Luxembourg is right. You have vaulted into the lead. Here's a question. Why Luxembourg? Like, how did they pull that off? That is absolutely right. It is small and it's very rich. It's actually the richest per capita country in Europe, over $100,000 per person. Okay, the capital city of Estonia offers free transit to its residents. What is the name of that capital city in Estonia? This is really going to be a geography quiz. What? Tallinn! Tallinn on the scoreboard. Okay. The capital of Slovenia offers free rides to seniors, disabled, and students. What is the name of that capital? Oh my, are you from like the Baltics and the Balkans or something? You are nailing this. What was your major in college? Oh, you are going to kill this. Okay. No, go for it. It's going to change later. The capital city of a very large nation offers free metro only to women. What is that city? Very large nation. Capital. How many are there? No. What? It's New Delhi, India. You only get like 10 seconds. New Delhi, India. And, okay, this one's easy. 2 cities in Spain offer free or heavily discounted passes to youth and seniors. Name those 2 cities in Spain. Good. Number 7 is a tough question, and this surprised me, and I haven't figured it out. In the USA, name the largest city that offers free bus rides to all its citizens. It's so hard, I'm going to give you hints. Here's one. Taylor Swift sleeps there regularly. What? Not Nashville. Who's her boyfriend? Nobody knows. Kansas City Chiefs. Nobody knows. Don't you have teenage daughters? Taylor Swift sleeps regularly in Kansas City, Missouri, and I mean, it's a totally red state. It's stupid. It's Kansas City, but it's in Missouri. That's true. That's really good. That's good. But the big one is Missouri. Okay, here's another tough question. Name the city in Washington State that has free transit. Pardon? I never even heard of that. So I'm going to give you a hint. It's named after a Greek paradise. Exactly. You are doing good, Margaret. Okay, name the college town in Montana that offers free bus rides to everyone. Margaret's pulling ahead. Okay, have you noticed anything here? College towns. Why do they get free transit? Students. And what do students do? They vote. They vote in that city, and then they vote, and they get everything they want. Okay, name the college town in New York State that offers free transit to students. Ithaca. This is becoming a nail biter. Okay, we're in the back stretch here. Name the college town in North Carolina that offers free transit. Wrong. Yes! Glenn got it. Okay, name the college town in Wisconsin that offers free transit. Madison. Okay. We need to hear from this side of the room. This is a 4-point question. It is possible to get 4 points if you name 4 different reasons free public transit is a good idea. 4 different reasons. Why is it a good idea? Other than it makes me happy. What? Go ahead. And why is that good? Environment. Tom said environment, that's what I wanted. He gets a point, but there's 3 other reasons. Yes, help poor people by enabling them to reduce their transportation costs. 2 more. What's that? Punish the rich. Yeah, I'm going to tell you the last 2 because they're kind of hard. Reduce traffic congestion. That's a good thing. Okay, make parking easier, because they're kind of tied in. Okay, a pilot project in New York City suggests that free transit would reduce car traffic by what percentage? So we're talking about if we have free transit, more people take the free transit, how much traffic is reduced? Yes. What? 20. That's good, modest, but good. 31, I'm going to give it to Jeff. 30. That is good. Okay, what is MUNI an acronym for? You know, it doesn't make any sense to me because I'm looking at it. MUNI is an acronym for San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency? Wrong. Okay, wrong. Okay, the next one. In AC Transit, what does the AC stand for? Good. 1 point for everybody. One of my proposals suggests asking San Francisco Bay Area billionaires to pay for free transit. How many billionaires live in the San Francisco Bay Area? What? No, not yet. What? Not yet. What? 17? 25 is closer. 25. 25 is closer. 30 is closer. Oh, 35 is real close. Who said 37? Okay, you got it. Now, you Balkan, and you haven't said anything for a while. Do you know all the answers, and you're just being like you're doing like a sharing thing here? You just because we're off geography. Okay, I got some more geography later. How much money do these 37 billionaires have added all together? This too much. I'm going to give you a point for that. This is a tough question, but just throw some numbers out. Billionaires, 37. Tick, 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 tick. 882 billion. How much would it cost to provide the city of San Francisco with a free bus system annually? Only 400 million. Quick math with that 882 billion that the local billionaires have. How many years could you fund free busing in San Francisco? That's really good, but not right. But it's good. 2,205 years. How many billionaires are there in the world? 3,200. How much wealth do they possess? 14 trillion. And I'm throwing in a final question here because you were talking about the Neoplatonists, and that kind of got me, that was interesting. There's been a lot of people that have said, how much difference in salaries should one person make over another? In the United States, it's probably like, minimum wage in Iowa is probably like $4.25, and there's all these people who make, $25 million a year. Who said long ago that there should only be a difference of 4? Nobody should get more than 4. Nobody should get more than 4 times more than the poorest person. I already gave you the hint. What? Not Huey Long. Who? Plato. It was Plato. Okay, I do not know who won. Does anybody here have an opinion on who won? You all won. I can just keep the card. What? I think Roger might have won. You got 7. Who got more than 7? You two. If you two were one person, you would have won. There you go. Give a big hand for
I got to tell you, Hank, I got people telling me, is that guy that's really funny going to be talking? And they're never talking about me. They're always talking about you, Hank. Hank Fellas here. So thanks, everybody, for coming out tonight. Remember, the next meeting will be second Wednesday of the month, like always, and hopefully you can come again. If you want to be a member of the club and decide who talks next, just put your name over there. Anyway, have a great night and stay as long as you want because we got food and we have company, so just hang out. Okay, thanks.